My focus primarily is in a couple of areas within pharmaceuticals and healthcare, one being the cell and gene therapy space, and then the second being the biosimilar space. So focusing really on innovation and exciting areas of healthcare that have emerged in the last year or so. I really think that the cell and gene therapies are extremely exciting. Over the last year in 2023, the FDA approved 7 cell and gene therapy products. So I think more than many of us expected. Sometimes the FDA can be viewed as not moving as fast as what we would hope. But in the cell and gene therapy space, with these treatments being so brand new and innovative and different from what the FDA is maybe used to seeing with drugs that treat thousands, if not millions of patients, we're now talking about drugs that might treat 10 to 500 patients in some cases. So they've got their work cut out for them. And I personally have been very impressed with the effort and the initiative that the FDA has been really focusing on around cell and gene therapies, approving 7 in 1 year. And then, we expect in the coming year, anywhere from, let's say 8 to 12 or more products to be approved in 2024. So this is an extremely exciting time for medicine in general, for healthcare broadly, and most importantly for patients who are really suffering with some devastating conditions that previously maybe had no treatment options at all. So I think that's the most exciting part, is that we're bringing treatments to patients who have had no other option in a lot of these cases. So I guess breaking the excitement and the innovation into a couple of different categories. Number one would be just the innovation itself. So the new treatment modalities, the new mechanisms of action, the new platforms that are being developed for some of the gene and cell therapies are extremely exciting and just, in my eyes, moving extremely quickly. So a very exciting area in itself. We had the first CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing product approved in December, which was really exciting for sickle cell therapy, and other unique cell therapy modalities came to market as well. So just in the realm of technology and innovation, all kinds of really exciting things going on. And then the second kind of category I would kind of address is just the conditions being treated. So, back in 2017, when the first cell therapies came to market, they were focused on hematologic malignancies, oncology products. We've come so far from that at this point. The majority of the products that were approved in 2023 were for non-oncology indications. So although there's still a huge unmet need in oncology, we're starting to address some of the ultra rare diseases that really maybe no one's noticed or paid attention to in healthcare before. So a really exciting time for just a more broad application of treatment availability for conditions that are just incredibly rare and again, unique to a small subset of population of patients. So I think the bottom line here with these therapies is the sky's really the limit. I think we're facing innovation that we haven't seen since, some of the monoclonal antibodies came to market years ago. It's the same type of excitement, the same type of innovation and new treatment options coming to patients. So I think we'll talk about some of the challenges throughout this discussion and some of the opportunities, but I do believe that this is the most exciting time that I've seen in healthcare. It is a great question. Obviously, the high cost of these products is a very hot topic. Not only the patient opportunities that are created with these products, we have kind of that other side of it where we're very concerned about the high cost. So I think one of the first things to consider that not everyone thinks about when they consider we have a sickle cell treatment available, and there are 100,000 patients in the US with sickle cell disease. I think the first thing that it's really important to consider, and what payers are thinking about, is not every patient with sickle cell will need this treatment or will seek this treatment. Only those most severe patients who are suffering from sickle cell and who really have no other options, who have tried some of the other treatments that are available. They are limited, I will say, but some of those patients aren't as severe, and they might not want to try a gene therapy or a cell therapy. They might not be ready for that. Their providers and their healthcare team might not think that the patient is a candidate. So I think payers are considering that, although that the population sounds significant, sometimes the actual patient group that seeks treatment is much smaller than the population that actually has the disease or the prevalence of the condition. So I think that's one thing that they consider, first and foremost, what is actual volume? How many patients will we actually be needing to consider for the cost of these treatments? And sometimes it's much lower than what you initially might assume. And then, payers have a very systemic approach to coverage of clinical technologies, and covering these products is not terribly different. So although they are high cost, and we know these are extremely high cost, back in the 90s and early 2000s, we thought specialty drugs in general were extremely high cost and unsustainable. So here we are 20 years later talking about the next group of, I've been known to call them like ultra specialty drugs, right? They're higher cost, they're more impactful to patients. They are, they're going to create some noise within the healthcare system due to the cost and obviously the clinical benefit. So what payers look at when they evaluate a treatment is not different necessarily when they're evaluating coverage for a high cost therapy like a cell and gene product. So, they traditionally look at the clinical benefit. Does the product offer a superior benefit to an existing treatment that's available? Are there measured outcomes in the clinical trial that are appropriate, that make sense for the patient? Are they clinically relevant? And especially in this case with these products, what does the durability look like and the sustainability of the patient response or the clinical benefit? So does this treatment, extend the patient's life for 10 years? Or does the treatment help the patient avoid hospitalizations for a lifetime? What does that actual clinical benefit look like for the patient? And, what is the value of that clinical benefit, which is sometimes difficult to define. The second thing that is very obviously considered is safety. So the safety profile of some of these products is not as clear as what we would like it to be due to the limited populations being treated. It's very challenging to study something and prove statistical significance, which as pharmacists, we love to see statistical significance, p-values. That's kind of what we live by. In this case, when there are only 10 patients being treated, we're not going to have that kind of confirmation of statistical significance and statistical value associated with a safety profile or with a clinical benefit for that matter. So it's really important for us to monitor patients over time and ensure that the safety profile is what we expect it to be. So that's the second key thing that payers are looking at. The one thing that none of us want to do as healthcare providers is put a patient at risk that we were not aware of prior to approving a therapy or encouraging a patient to take a certain product or medicine. The next thing, of course, is the place in therapy. So sometimes these products seem very exciting, and we have patients that just want to try the latest and greatest thing, which is very reasonable in many of these cases. However, oftentimes there are treatment options that exist for these patients that might be appropriate as a first line or a second line therapy. So sometimes in the case, especially of oncology, there are very clear clinical guidelines that outline here's what is expected as an acceptable first line, second line, third line treatment for a specific type of cancer. And that is obviously evaluated as well. One of the things that, we want to see more is clarity in treatment guidelines so that the place in therapy of a cell and gene product is very clearly delineated. And this will help with payer coverage as well. I know that's something that we work with manufacturers on very often, is helping define kind of that place in therapy. Where does this product fit in the overall treatment realm for this condition or disease? So that's another thing that payers are looking at, and sometimes is much more clear than others with some of these conditions that are very new, that again, maybe not too many people have ever really become familiar with. it's difficult to say what is the treatment guideline for this condition when only, a few people in the world have that particular condition. So that can be a more challenging thing in this space, but it is one of the steps that payers go through as they determine coverage. And then, of course, is there an unmet need? I think it's one of the things that is very apparent with some of these treatments is it's a complete unmet need. So there are no other options. There is no treatment guideline because the patients are really just being symptomatically treated. So if there's a completely unmet need, I think that the likelihood of these products being adopted by payers is much higher because there is no other first line, second line, for example, option for that patient. And then finally, of course, cost is considered. And I know we'll talk about cost a little bit later in this discussion, how cost can be managed in different ways by payers and patients. But cost is obviously a key component, especially when we're talking about these ultra high cost products. But that's kind of the stepwise process that they go through. And then, of course, other factors that I know are being considered in this space include the FDA approval pathway. So there are a couple of different pathways that innovative treatments like cell and gene therapies can go through in order to achieve FDA approval. So the payers also look at, did the product have accelerated approval? Did the product have full clinical outcomes documented for a full approval? What does that approval actually look like? And sometimes that is taken into consideration as well. And I know this is something that the FDA and payers struggle with a little bit because we do want to get these products to patients as quickly as possible. But we also want to make sure that, from a payer's perspective, if we're going to pay for them, we know they're going to work and that they're safe for patients. So it's really a balance between some of those deciding partners within the healthcare system. A few other factors are considered, like the channel of delivery, as well as the benefit that the product will fall under, the medical versus pharmacy. There are some other things that fall into how the benefit is designed for the particular patient, how much they will pay out of pocket, how much the plan will pay, et cetera. But those are some of the other factors that play into that as well. I think that, I know that this has been a challenge in healthcare for as long as I can remember. Cost has been a barrier to healthcare. U.S. has some of the highest costs in the world as far as healthcare goes, and patients are not insensitive to that, obviously. And this cost challenge is not exclusive to medications or innovative treatments. Unfortunately, it's broad across all of healthcare. With these significant prices, there's more sensitivity around them. Again, I compare this to the initial specialty drug surge in the 90s and early 2000s. It's just very much spotlighted right now because these are more expensive than what we were kind of used to seeing. So absolutely, access is a huge challenge for patients. And I think if you think about patient access in this setting, I think really the patient journey is kind of twofold. One component is kind of the clinical journey that the patient has to go down, the difficulty in actually accessing a treatment center, getting diagnosed, having the means, not only financially, but logistically, to get to a treatment center if there's not one near them. So there's kind of that clinical journey, and then there's the financial journey kind of on the other side of that. How do they pay for that product? How do they pay for the hospitalization? How do they pay for the trip to go to the city where the treatment center is if there's not one local to where they live? And, how do they sustain their income if they're employed during that time? So there are so many questions that patients need to face that are extremely overwhelming to them, particularly if they're facing a new diagnosis or a treatment that might be unsettling in itself. But since we're talking about cost here, let's look at the financial side of that journey. Once the patient is identified as a candidate and the patient's healthcare benefits will be evaluated, there's an entire process, obviously, with benefit evaluation and reimbursement support that is done either by the patient's provider or by a provider that a manufacturer hires to help patients through that. Sometimes these are called specialty hubs or patient support hubs. So there are a few different options for patients to kind of start looking at. And most often with these sophisticated treatment centers, they help patients down these paths. So they guide patients towards the pharmaceutical manufacturer's hub or the outsourced hub or a option for them to seek financial support. So a couple things are considered when we're talking about cost. One, the type of insurance that they have is the first thing that needs to be evaluated. Commercial plans versus Medicaid and Medicare can be handled differently as far as financial support for patients or if they're uninsured. So patient assistance programs that are funded through manufacturers are available to patients who have commercial insurance or who are completely uninsured. So for these patients who have these types of payers or don't have a payer, these financial or patient assistance programs are available, and sometimes these assistance program designs actually cap the amount that the patient has to pay out of pocket. So the manufacturer actually subsidizes the patient out of pocket that they are required to pay as part of their benefit design through their payer. And of course, this manufacturer support is a layer on top of what the payer has already paid for that product if they do indeed cover it. So that's a really good option for patients who have commercial insurance or who are uninsured. Unfortunately, that's not available for patients who are beneficiaries of Medicaid or Medicare. Because they're government sponsored programs, these beneficiaries cannot access these manufacturer funds due to regulatory guidelines. They can, however, access patient foundation funding. So there are many foundations available who are also sometimes tightly associated with advocacy groups where patients can access funds through foundations that are making funds available to patients with specific diseases or for specific treatments. So that's an option for patients who have Medicare or Medicaid. Neither of these options, I would say, are perfect or ideal. However, I do believe that they are good options for patients for the healthcare system that is available to them today. Even with these considered, however, these are daunting to a patient. So I think it's really important that the healthcare provider who is, a certified treatment center is guiding the patient to these resources or guiding these patients to a resource that can help really walk them through all of these treatment options, all of these financial options, as well as how they can access these, because most patients are not highly skilled in navigating really complex areas within the healthcare system. So it's really important for them to get that help.